Welcome to today's episode. And today we will be talking about challenging health journeys and navigating severe anxiety. I want to remind you, if you or someone you know is struggling or in crisis, help is available. You can call or text 988 or chat 988lifeline.org. I'm your host, Megan Babcock, and the founder of It's Your Story to Tell and the Coach Collective. And today I am thrilled to have Katie Stafford with me. Thank you, Katie, for joining me on the podcast.
Thank you, Megan. I am so excited to be here with you today.
Well, it has been such a pleasure getting to know you and so many other amazing nurse coaches in the growing Facebook community that we're both a part of. And, when I go through those posts, I'm always so inspired, and you are one of those nurses that really stood out for your willingness to be vulnerable and share your own personal growth. And that power of vulnerability has played a significant role in my journey. And I'm so excited to just have you on this platform where you can share more about your story. And I think you listeners will discover that Katie and I share some similar perspectives around healthcare. And I promise it's probably going to be a pretty engaging conversation. So, welcome. And Katie, let's just jump in. And I'd love if you would start sharing a little bit about your life, kind of leading up to the pivotal moments that led you to reevaluate your nursing career and bring you to this point in your life where you are a nurse coach and you are walking alongside of others who are wanting to take their life to new levels.
Where would you like me to start?
You choose. That's the beauty of this. It's all up to you. What really stood out as some real significant barriers or difficulties that you were navigating? I know there was your health things. So were there things that led up to potentially your health decline, or was it kind of your experience with the healthcare system as a patient that started to shift for you?
So my shift really did start with those health struggles of an onset of chronic pain. I developed chronic pain in 2015. I did not know at the time that it was very much driven by the stress of changing jobs. I began working in the OR, which was a brand new experience for me. And almost immediately that pain set in and it never went away, and it kept getting worse and it kept getting worse and it kept getting worse. And I had to work through it. That was extremely challenging to show up every day in that high stress environment, trying to learn something new. It was never gone. Thankfully, I did sleep. Like that was the one reprieve I got, was that I was able to sleep, but it was there when I woke up and it was there when I went to bed. And I did everything that the doctors told me to do. I started seeing a pain specialist who was a pain interventionist, and I did all of the conservative treatments. I ended up with several rounds of trigger point injections. I ended up with epidural injections in my back, so into the spine, which is scary. It's really scary. And I wasn't any better with any of those conservative treatments or physical therapy or any of it. And then I had surgery. I was 36 when I had surgery. And I had surgery on my neck. And I was just sure that that was the one thing that was going to fix it. Like it was finally going to be better. Like I was so desperate for relief that I was willing to do whatever they told me to do. And then I had that surgery and I was no better. I was no better after that surgery. And the trauma of having surgery and the stress and trauma of going back to work in that condition, it got worse.
Wow. Yeah, well, I did spend some time as an orthopedic nurse, and I often saw that we would do surgery, and it would be really difficult for these patients. And I've heard a lot of stories where there's so much hope in the hip replacement, the knee replacement, the surgery to just help reduce pain, whether it's something in their spine and they need to have some sort of correction there. And then when it doesn't give that relief, it's almost worse. It's the emotional, just the hopefulness that you had going into it, and then now here you are, and it's like, now what do I do next? I also think it's kind of interesting that you noticed, and I don't know if you recognized this at the time, but that there was a shift in your body's response with the new job. Is that something that you realized like at the time, or was it something that you have a better, looking back and realizing that there may have been something in that environment, or what do you contribute it to?
That's really interesting. Because I think that I did initially think that it was just stress related. Like, I think that I did recognize that
Mm.
early on, because the pain that I had was actually one I had experienced many years before when I was experiencing those really high levels of chronic anxiety. And I would notice that I would develop these really like tight, like searing pain points in my back with really high levels of stress. And so I think I identified the stress component early on. But the thing that came later on that I think was also a factor, because I think that I had a pretty high level of toxicity in my body at the time. So, when you go to work in the OR, and interestingly, I worked with an orthopedic surgeon in the OR. But when you work in the OR, you wear a mask and your face is covered all the time. And up to that point, I had never had to wear a mask for hours and
Mm.
hours and hours at a time. And I didn't make that connection until COVID hit. And I had to go to work with my face covered all day long. And if I would get up, I have a history of chronic headaches. And if I would get up of a morning when I had to go to work and I would have just a little tiny bit of a headache, by the time my day was done, it would be so bad that I could not think straight. It was a struggle to drive home. And I never really gave any consideration to my breathing being impaired by having my face covered.
Mhm.
And I think that it was a factor. I think that it drove a higher level of maybe carbon dioxide, and so maybe it was an increase in inflammation. So I think that it probably did play a
Mhm.
factor in what I experienced with that onset in 2015.
Wow. Wow, that's really interesting. I'm thinking like the different and stress level and all of that, but that's so interesting to start looking back and really looking at what are all the different things that changed, right? Because in our life, we'll enter into a new phase or stage of life, or things are hard, and there's probably always multiple factors that could be contributing. And that's such a powerful testimony to curiosity. And when we're going through things, and our bodies responding, how important it is to really not dismiss anything as a possible cause of what you're going through. So you had this surgery, you went back to work, and it sounds like you continued to work and you worked through COVID. So, how did you continue to manage this? What was its impact after the surgery was not providing you the relief? And how did you ultimately find relief for yourself? Or maybe if you haven't found relief, how are you navigating it, the chronic pain
Mm, that's
now?
a great question. So yes, I went back to work and the pain intensified, it amplified. And, as you were saying, that there was so much hope in that surgery. And for me, there was so much hope in everything they told me to do. And when I went back to the pain intervention doctor with still all this pain, and I did trigger points again, and the last round of trigger point injections I had just into the muscle tissue of my back, like they were so incredibly painful. I'm not usually one to be afraid of needles or to shy away from things that are really uncomfortable. I feel like I have a decently high tolerance for pain, but they were so painful. It was so awful. And I don't think they really knew what to do with me. My spine surgeon told me that he had fixed what was wrong with me, that there was a very emotional component to what was going on with me, which is a fancy PC way of saying it's all in your head. You're crazy. And at the time, I didn't know what to do with that. Like I knew what he meant by it, but in reflection now, I also know that he was right for all the wrong reasons, because there was a lot of emotional component to it.
Right.
But when the pain interventionist started talking about sending me to a rheumatologist, sending me on to another specialist, the goal of surgery was to get off of medication. I was at one time before surgery, I was on medication for anxiety and depression, but then I was also on some psychotropic drugs to help control the pain. I was on like 6 different psychotropic drugs at age 35. And then I
Wow.
was also on, high powered prescription anti-inflammatories and every muscle relaxer under the sun. And then I had surgery, and the big one to get off of after surgery was gabapentin, because I really didn't like the way it made me feel. I didn't like the side effects, and I couldn't quit taking it. So then we started talking rheumatology consult, and it was like, no, like, no, I was so afraid of going down the road of being put on a biologic medication, a biologic drug. Those carry a very heavy side effect burden, up to and including cancer. And it was very, very frightening for me to even think about that being where I was headed. And I believe if I had not changed course, I believe I would have ended up right there, and I would have been the same customer of the medical system that so many end up being. And I wasn't willing to do that. Um, I used to, now in all the growth that I've done, I like to think that I don't have to plead with God to get answers, but I did. I did every night. I would go to bed crying, just what do I have to do to fix it? Like what do I need to do to make this pain better? Because while I never was suicidal, I really came to understand how people with chronic pain would make the decision to not do it anymore, like to not keep living with it. And I don't know where I would have ended up if that had continued. So I started doing my own research. I started thinking outside of the box. I felt very betrayed when I started realizing that everything that I had ever been taught, everything I had ever believed to be true, everything we learned in nursing school was not really the whole picture, and much of it was even lies. Like it really felt like lies. And so the first step that I took was I hired a Chinese acupuncturist, a traditionally trained Chinese acupuncturist. And
That's so
that
amazing.
was the first step.
I love acupuncture. I love it. Like, so when I was in nursing school in Virginia, so not far from
Ah,
you, but, right? You're in Virginia? Is that
yes,
right?
and
You're like,
about
yeah,
two and a
okay.
half hours from
Yeah.
Lynchburg.
So,
Yeah.
yep, yep. So, and I had really severe pain. And I also had a lot of GI issues. And even though I was a nurse, I just never wanted to be just taking pills. I think, hoped getting into nursing, we actually was like, oh, get people better. And like medicine is kind of a bridge or a last resort, not the only tool in the toolbox. And because I was very into integrative medicine, complementary medicine, utilizing all kinds of different healing modalities. And I think as a nursing student, I was super hopeful that like that could be possible. But then as I was a nurse for
Mm.
years and years, and I've been a nurse now 21 years. Oh my gosh, it's so old. But, and I decided, so I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia and irritable bowel, and but I decided, much like you have in your journey, but I was just like, I can't go down that road of just one pill and the next pill and the next pill. I want to get better. And at that point, I don't think I realized the the trauma and how trauma is stored in your body. Like, I love the book Body Keeps the Score, and just how important it is to recognize things from our past get stored in our body and show up as pain. I believe even cancer
Mm-hmm.
and autoimmune. And I started seeing a chiropractor who was an acupuncturist, and I went on a total plant-based diet, juicing, something that I learned from going to some seminars on reversing cancer. And I was like, okay, well, if we can reverse cancer, what can we do here, um, and yes, it wasn't immediate, but it was, I actually did get relief. Unlike, I'm sorry, like with your process, it was a long process. And then once I've done my emotional work, it's even allowed me to have a whole new level of just wellness, mind, body, and spirit. And I have a acupuncturist. I do herbal tea, or all the different teas and things that they they prescribe, and it really is amazing the difference that it can make. So I'm so glad you tried something different. Like, what made you think, oh, I'm gonna go see a traditionally trained Chinese acupuncturist?
I don't really know what led me to that, other than when, that's one of those modalities that is well researched and is
Mhm.
not considered on the fringe, I guess.
Sure.
Um, where I live locally, there's not a lot of options. And so the way I found the one that I did was simply to do that Google search. And as it turns out, she works with the medical students at Virginia Tech. So like she even is bringing some
Amazing.
acupuncture into those osteopathic medical schools. So I thought that was really
Yes.
great. And it was a really great first step for me, um, to
Mm.
do that and to just step outside of the mainstream. At the same time, I there were a couple of local women who would come to my house for massage therapy. So two massage therapists that are local to me, and they would come to my house. And so we did a lot of work just on the muscle tissue. And it never really kept the pain away. It never really kept those muscle knots away. But through that experience, one of those massage therapists gave me the name of a naturopathic doctor that she saw. And so it was several months before I took that step, but then that was the next step. And all the while I'm learning all these things about cutting out processed food and really letting go of those ultra processed things, and how calories are not just calories. And believe it or not, I have a 4-year degree in foods
Mhm.
and nutrition, and I did not know that it really mattered the content of your calories. So so there's that.
Well, I was talking to one of the doctors that I worked with in the past, and we were just talking about this whole holistic approach. And she's like, do you know how much training doctors get in nutrition? And I was like, no. And she said, one class. And she goes, and my professor taught me that potatoes are a vegetable. And I was like, okay, so we have a problem. Like, if, yeah. And, I think I told you when we were just talking that I was so fortunate when my husband got diagnosed with cancer about almost 5 years ago. We were so fortunate that his oncologist happened to be a naturopath before she became a med onc.
Yeah.
And the difference that that made was, I mean, amazing. He didn't have the same level of side effects. We used acupuncture for his nausea. We were using all kinds of different teas and mushrooms, and she would tell me, okay, you can take this and you can take that. At these different times, and it was so beautiful to see how we could engage in both environments, because they said, he has to have a bone marrow transplant, but it was so empowering for us to actually be able to do something, at least even for me, to do something that I felt like was improving his health, because so much of our physical health is also dependent on our mental health.
Mm, yeah.
I don't know. Did you find it empowering when you started to kind of take action, learn new things, see these new providers?
Yes, because the other thing that happened in the time after that surgery where I was still having so much pain was all of the anti-anxiety and antidepressant medication I was taking. Like, it was just like they stopped working. Like, I cried all the time. I was very depressed. I was very anxious. I very much felt like I had nothing else to hope for. And then I also started experiencing a lot of hormonal irregularities. And as this progressed, like, I felt so much that they were all connected, like the pain and the hormones. Like, I started tracking the pain and could see it increase with my cycles at certain times.
Mm.
And what ended up happening was, we had talked about the rheumatology consult. And then it was somebody I was sent to GYN for the hormonal stuff. So I was sent to see a doctor for that, and then I was told to do therapy. And it was like I just wanted somebody to look at the whole picture. I felt so deeply, and maybe that was I believe that must have been the answer to the prayer. Please God, show me what I need to do, what put me on the right path. And then it's like I started realizing this is all connected. I need somebody to look at the whole picture, and a naturopathic doctor does that. They look at things from a different lens. Um, she
Mhm.
was wonderful, but didn't do the hormone testing that she felt like I needed. So then I ended up a patient of integrative medicine. And again, they just looked with a different lens. They looked at things like nutrient deficiencies, very pivotal things that helped me to get to a place where I didn't have pain every single day were taking a high quality magnesium supplement and somebody treating me for a suboptimal thyroid, hypothyroid. Like, I do not have
Mm.
abnormal thyroid labs, but I was very classically symptomatic for 18 years before somebody treated it.
Wow, that is such a good point, because that happens often where, well, the normal range is this. And, I live in Oregon. There is not a lot of sun for a lot of the year. So that affects our vitamin D, which affects so many other processes in our body. And so I would go to the doctor and they'd be like, oh, your vitamin D is normal. And I'm like, it was like barely over
Mm,
30. So it was normal, right? Well, after COVID, and after I got COVID a while, I started to get numbness and tingling in my hands and feet. And I was just like, what is going on? I was getting worried about other like autoimmune things, and I couldn't figure out. And then it was like coming where it was more than just my fingers. And it's like, well, I happened to be getting a functional medicine nurse certification. And I started learning about vitamin B12 and its impact on numbness and tingling. And I was like, okay, I went to my doctor. I love my doctor because even though he might think I'm crazy, I'll be like, can you run this? And he'll be like, sure. So I said, I think this is what's going on. He's like, yeah, that could be. So he ran, a bunch of nutritional labs, and my B12 came back so low and my vitamin D was so low. Well, I just had no energy, all of those things. Well, I had been taking supplements, and I take good quality supplements. I was taking sublingual vitamin D, all of these things, but my GI system wasn't doing very well, especially after COVID, because it kind of flared up. All that autoimmune stuff, it made worse, and it was trying to kind of get that into a better place. And so I started doing injections of vitamins. And lo and behold, my B12 went up. Like, I no more numbness and tingling, and my energy levels were better. I get sick less often, and so finding that suboptimal, when you're presenting from a medical perspective as normal, isn't always the case. So I'm so glad that you were able to figure that out, because once you can figure those things out, it's a pretty easy fix. You just do what you need to do to support your thyroid. You take the supplements that you need to take. You figure out what's the right dosing, what's the right route. And wow, I mean, it makes such a difference.
Yeah.
So I know you said to me one of the things that really helped you kind of take your development to another level was when you hired a coach. I love to know a little bit about that.
Yeah. So after my whole experience with the medical system and knowing this whole, it's one of those, once you know, you can't unknow this whole other side
Mm-hmm.
of health and wellness. Um, I became a patient of integrative medicine in 2018. And from that point, knew that I was not reaching my potential at the bedside. I did not continue working in the OR, but then worked outpatient surgery again, which had been my home before going to the OR. And it's like, then you're doing surgeries on people without identifying any root causes for why they're there. So my unnecessary surgery led me to have a new viewpoint on some of the things that we were doing as nurses in the hospital, and they're not our call, and we don't know what surgeries are necessary or not, but I knew we weren't getting at root causes. So then it's like my
Mm-hmm.
life was changed, and it's like I knew I wasn't reaching my potential, and I wanted to help people in a profoundly different way. And I knew that for about 5 years before I did anything about it. Um, it took a while. It took a while to actually take the first step. And the first step was to, I began hearing about nurse coaching. I began reading some about it. And the first step was I had a conversation with another nurse coach. And then I signed up for certification.
That's awesome. Well, how long have you been working as a nurse coach? And do you have a specific kind of client profile that they're like, oh, if I have this going on, Katie's my girl. Like, she's going to walk me through how to navigate to the other side.
Yeah. So I have been coaching right at 2 years, since I started my business and have been coaching clients. And that first year, I was all for just coaching whoever. And what that allowed me to do was to really see who I wanted to coach. So of course, I initially thought that I would do nutrition and lifestyle medicine type of coaching. But the more conversations I had, the deeper they went, the more that people resonated with me when they really told me where they were really struggling. Um, where they were really struggling to overcome their limiting beliefs and the stories that they tell themselves. So now my ideal client is that former version of myself, that person who's trying to
Mhm.
overcome perfectionism, who recognizes that they try to control everything, even when many things are without their control. Um, my clients are high achievers. High achievers
Mhm.
are almost by design, I think, come to be perfectionists. They expect a lot of themselves. They're very hard on themselves. And I've been that person. And so I understand what it's like to be there. And I understand what it takes to deconstruct that.
No wonder why I was so drawn to you just on a like spiritual connection level, because that is my story. You know,
Mm,
I am a high achiever, people pleaser, codependent, perfectionist. And when I started my journey as a coach, you've been doing it a little longer than I have. But I thought very similar. I had gotten certified in functional medicine. Then I got certified as a nurse coach. I shared this perspective that you did, like there's more we can do for people. Let's get to the root cause. But I thought it would be all um, from a health perspective. And what was amazing in my first cohort of six people that I had as like a group coaching, and they were doing individual coaching with me for like a 6 week period. And it, they were drawn to me mostly for health things. But as we began working together, we were getting to root childhood traumas and the false narratives that were placed on them. You know, it could have been something a teacher said as innocent as, you know, they weren't trying to, but that implanted a belief inside of them. And it was like, as we started working through these things, the health things became less of an issue.
mm,
And that's when I really began to understand in my own life why my health had gotten so much better too. Because at first I was contributing it, like I was doing a good job of maintaining it with all of these practitioners that I was seeing for chiropractic and acupuncture and massage therapy, and how I was eating. But what I realized when I really started looking at it, that as I began doing my healing work and going back to those root causes of the need for perfectionism, like perfectionism is just a symptom, right? And so that's when I learned, if we can get to the root, not just at our health, but at our whole person, right? Those root causes are so powerful and can really change so many aspects of your life as you start working on them. So I love that. I think that is such honestly, if I had to boil down coaching, I feel like all roads lead to that, what you're just saying,
mm-hmm.
right? If you may come in thinking, oh, I'm struggling with this toxic relationship, um but really it's, you've got to get to what you can control, and it's like, why are you even there in the first place, which is related to your false beliefs, your limiting beliefs, your stories you're telling
Yeah.
yourself.
Yeah. And like, those were things that when I started this journey that I didn't know I needed to do. And I have continued to have health
Mm-hmm.
struggles and mystery symptoms. And even with all the right external inputs, they weren't really
Mm-hmm.
getting better. And so it required digger
Mm-hmm.
deeping. And the truth is that our clients don't, it's not a lack of knowledge. There's reasons why they are unable to do the things that they're told are the healthy things to do.
Yeah. Oh, I've said that before too. We live in the world where information is at our fingertips. And I think that can also become very frustrating for someone who's struggling, right? Because they know they like want something different, but yet they can't do it,
Mm.
and it's like that for addictions. I mean, any coping mechanism that's unhealthy, right? And so that could be food, that could be drugs, it could be alcohol. I mean, it could be perfectionism, but it's like there's something inside of you that keeps you from just choosing to do something different. And that journey is really, I think, accelerated when you can walk alongside of with someone, right, who's kind of gone along on this path. They're willing to share, and I think that's what's so beautiful about coaching and us sharing our story, and then helping people. And then hopefully, my goal is people keep passing that same thing down, and hopefully we can actually make a difference in the mental health of our nation, because what we're doing is clearly not working. Right?
Absolutely.
All evidence points to
Absolutely.
abort.
You know, changing the internal dialogue. Like, we're our own worst critics. And if we can change the internal dialogue, like, everything else falls into place.
That is so good. Well, if people want to connect with you, and I hope they do, because I think you have a story that would be one that so many people could really benefit from having that support. Anxiety and chronic pain and autoimmune things, they all go hand in hand. And you've just shared how you've walked through that. How would they get in touch with you? What's your website, your social media?
Yeah. So my website is very simple. It's just my business name, which is KatherineStaffordCoaching.com. So that's a pretty easy find. To find me on Facebook, I am on I'm Katie Stafford, and I am very active on Facebook. You mentioned early in our conversation, Megan, about my willingness to show up vulnerably, and it's taken me time to get there, but
Mhm.
I do that. I share a lot of my own story and my own insights from my own growth. And if I'm having a bad day, you're probably going to read it in my post. If I'm really struggling, because I do still struggle, like, anxiety is still very much a thing that crops up for me, kind of like perfectionism. It gets sneakier and sneakier the more we work on it. Like, it inevitably comes back, and then the trick gets to be trying to find why. So if I'm having a bad week or bad few days that are really challenging for me, people are going to see that, because I do share very openly about my journey.
Which I love, because when you do that, it's validating and safety. Like for me, and when I see, like, okay, wow, I know what she's wanting to do and how she's accomplishing so much of making a difference in the world, but she's not afraid to share the struggle and be vulnerable too. And so I just have appreciated it. I always am like impressed by just how active you are and getting your information out there. So people should definitely go and follow along, because I know that there will be information that's valuable. We will drop that information into the show notes so that you have an easy time getting connected with Katie. But Katie, thank you again for just coming on and sharing your story. I think that the more we do this as nurses,
Mm.
we will begin to see a shift in healthcare. People want to get better, and we're helping them find solutions to that. So thanks for talking with me
Thank you so
today.
much, Megan. I appreciate you having me on.
All right, you guys, we look forward to seeing you next episode. And we hope that if this has been something that's been impactful for you, encouraged you, that you will leave us a comment, give us a thumbs up. And if you know someone who's struggling with chronic pain or anxiety, share this with them. It would be a really great way to just let them know that you want to support them. And we appreciate you being listeners. Have a great day.